I was on a path. I knew I couldn't see the path, but I knew I was on the right path. I was watching the like fog become sparkles, like little glitter all over the place. And in this glitter, there was these darker areas. And this was before mobile phones or anything else. I can explain to them now, they look like mobile phones. Okay. They're like little tiny screens that I could see all over the place. And these little tiny screens, when I looked close at them, had my memories in them. The music was there, the music that was, just so soft and so calming. You felt I had emotions. I felt so good. It felt absolutely beautiful, stunning colors. Everything was just out of this world. And that's why it felt so different. It felt so different. I was in a whole new universe, whole new place. I didn't know where I was, didn't care. It was good. I'm staying there.
My guest today is Susan Jane, who had an out of body experience and then a few months later had a near death experience. And since then, she has been able to figure out how to truly leave her body with astral travel. And I'm always interested in learning more about how people do this because I know when you watch these interviews, you're curious, and a lot of people sometimes almost wish that they could have an experience like this. And I think that Susan Jane is going to share with us today how you could do what she does. So, Susan Jane, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia.
Yes, thank you so much. It's morning here, and I believe it's evening for you over there.
Yeah, so you're a day ahead of us. So, happy Friday for you.
Thank
Unhappy Friday for me because I'm still in Thursday, but I'm
you.
really excited to connect with you because you do have such an interesting story. So, why don't you start with what your life was like before all of this out of body near death experience and national travel happened to you?
Oh, I'd be delighted because it was really boring. Like, really, it was just a regular life. I have I had the ability to understand people's emotions, so quite intuitive in that aspect. Not realizing that I was like that. I remember one day coming home from primary school and saying to my sister, "Oh, Mum's in a bad mood," and we were just coming out of the gates, and we'd have to walk home. And she'd say to me, "How do you know she's in a bad mood?" I said, "Well, how do you not know she's in a bad mood?" Like I could feel that I didn't understand what periods were and what menopause was or anything else. But all I felt was that Mum was in a bad mood. And of course, by the time we got home, Mum wasn't very happy because she was going through what Mum was going through. And my sister turned around and basically blamed me for it. So I just held back on my feelings and what I was experiencing, not realizing that other people just didn't get that. So my life was, well, as far as I was concerned, it was pretty just general, pretty normal. I was one of 8 kids, so there was lots of things to do and always lots of things happening. But that was before I went on holidays with my younger sister, 2 states away. So I lived in Victoria in Australia, and I went on holidays to the Gold Coast, and that's when everything changed.
Okay, so you had this out of body experience, and I'm guessing you didn't plan for this. So, what in the
No.
heck happened to you, and how old were you when this happened?
So I was 18 at the time. And again, we went on holidays. My younger sister and I went on holidays. So we had 2 weeks up on the beautiful Gold Coast where I actually live now. What had happened was we were just about to head home. We had like 2 days left and we'd been out. And she decided to go home back to the unit. And I stayed around because we'd met some people. So I'd stayed around, had a few drinks, and just enjoyed life and started heading back to the unit. As I'm heading back to the unit, I got a tap on the shoulder. Now, I just passed a young couple, and I thought that that's who was tapping me on the shoulder. So I've turned around and I was punched in the face and knocked out. So I didn't know anything. Like I didn't even see anybody, didn't anything. I was just king hit, as they call it in Australia, and obviously hit the concrete pavers. I came to being dragged into the back of a car by my hair. and just did not know what was going on. But what was happening was it was a pack raid. So I was being attacked in the back of the car. While this was happening, I tried to fight back like you normally do, just a reaction, a response because everything hurts. I tried to fight back, and as I tried to fight back, it just resulted in more bruises, more problems. So I had to stop. And I remember thinking to myself, now, one thing you've got to remember is I'm not a religious person. I don't follow religion as per se, as the sort of structured religion type. But in primary school, I think for 2 months, I actually went to Sunday school and didn't get much out of it, but I obviously got enough out of it to know that, okay, there's things that we can do. There's things bigger than ourselves that we can connect with and we can talk to. So I am being attacked in the back of this car. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't stop them doing what they're doing to me because I tried that. That didn't work. I can't stop this, but how can I stop them doing it to anyone else? And as soon as I said that, I left my body and I was outside of the car. Now, when I talk about it, I talk about her or she because even though that was me, I could see me, it wasn't me, if that makes sense. I remember looking at her and you could see the blood coming down the side of her lip, but I couldn't taste anything. I could see the energy coming out of the back of her head where she was dragged into the car, but I couldn't feel anything. As this out of body experience was happening, there was no emotional attachment for me whatsoever to that body and to the things that was around them. There was no smell of alcohol or cigarettes that I could smell earlier. There was nothing like that happening in there. And I just remember looking in amazement at what was going on. I do remember looking around as if to say, well, is anyone going to help her? Like there's obviously an issue here. Is anyone going to help her? And I looked around, and as you've looked around, it's like you're in a full moon evening. So it was dark, but it had that blue light on it, blue hue around. And I'm watching what they're doing to her, and I'm watching her body go through this, but there was just nothing. There was no attachment to it. There was no, oh my goodness, I feel sorry for her. Oh my goodness, this is happening. There was nothing of that. It was just like, this is fact. This is what's happening. But as I was there, I got and I can't say it's a booming voice or anything else, but I got the information that I needed, that was asked of what I asked for. I asked, how can I stop these people doing this to anyone else? The information came to me. And within an instant, I'm back in my body again. And if you can imagine not feeling anything to feeling everything in one big foul swoop, the smell of cigarettes, the horrible feelings that you're getting, the pain in the jaw, the back of the hair where it was bleeding, and where you got dragged into the car, the other body areas that were being attacked in that sort of a way, everything comes back in one big foul swoop. And it was then that I went, okay, this is what I had to do. Didn't really think about it, just started doing it. So I started to pray to them. And again, I'm not religious, so this didn't really make sense to me. I just did it. And so I started to pray to them out loud. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. And I just kept on repeating it louder and louder. They didn't like it. They tried to stop me. The hand around the throat, the hand around the mouth to try and stop me from speaking. But I kept on going. I kept on saying, forgive them, Lord, louder and louder. Forgive them, forgive them. And it just got louder and louder until eventually I couldn't speak because the throat and the hand around the throat and the hand around the mouth, I became unconscious. I came to in the gutter on the side of the road and had to make my way back to the unit where I was staying, which I was on holiday, so I didn't quite know where I was going and had to sort of stagger around for quite some time before I got back to where I needed to be. That was my first experience.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to experience something like that. I can't even imagine the bewilderment that must
Mm.
have happened. And It's interesting, and I need to ask you a question, which is
Yeah.
probably not what you're thinking I'm going to ask you. Why in the world do you call that an out-of-body experience and not a near-death experience? I have watched, listened to, and read probably well over 2,500 of these and interviewed almost 150 people. And I feel like yours, anytime your body is close to, or there's a situation where you are close to death, which it sounds like you could have been, your soul detaches and leaves, and you had all the markers of what people talk about when they have a car accident, a heart attack, whatever it is that causes them to go. Like, you feel detached, you don't feel connected to Susan Jane down there, and you're looking at it as her, not me, and you have, an above. So why do you call it an out of body instead of a near death experience for this one? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's fine. And I have thought of that too. One of the things I needed to say too is I have never ever spoke about that situation because I didn't understand what it was happening. I never spoke about it for about 15 years. I
You didn't tell anybody? Like, what did people think happened to you?
Well, I was attacked. I talk about that, but I didn't talk about the experience I had during the attack.
Okay.
It did not make sense. Why on earth am I praying to somebody or to people that are attacking me? Like, that doesn't make sense
Right,
to me.
right.
I never said anything. So that was that. The reason why I call that an out of body experience and not a near death experience is because of what I experienced with my, what I believe, a near death experience.
Okay. Well, and I guess maybe you're the perfect person to make that dissemination between the two, because maybe that didn't feel to you as real as the next one did. So I'm going to be curious to ask you a little bit about what some of the differences were, and maybe you'll just explain it as you tell that story, because this is fascinating to me.
Okay. Okay, so I'll go into the next part because you'll get the understanding, and it is very different. It isn't very different. It is different, but it isn't very different. It's a bit strange. And having the three experiences really gave me that very strong grounding, and that's why I do intuitive mediumship, because it gave me that understanding of intuition. But I'll go back to that later. So I've had that experience there almost 12 months to the day. I had my what I call my near death experience. Now I'm going to tell you the difference, and it's really quite strange because of what you were saying about the car accidents and things like that. My near death experience, nothing at all happened to me. Basically, I passed out. So, no accident, no horrific scene, nothing. I was at work. I worked in a bank. I was at work. I started to feel ill, and I sort of went, I don't feel very well. And eventually I passed out. It's what happened when I passed out that made that feel like a near death experience, because I didn't stay with my body. In the outer body experience, I stayed with my body, and I was there with my body. I could see my body all the time. With the near death experience, I must have passed out, obviously, because I don't remember that bit. And they must have laid me on this low bed that I didn't know we had. It's one of like a fold out banana lounge, we call them in Australia. And they're plastic and you fold them out. We must have had one in the staff room, which I didn't know of. So they've obviously laid me on that. Now, I remember the part I remember was I'm looking up and everybody's looking down at me. And you would have heard them from somebody in say in the hospital or something where you have people looking over you. I remember standing up and saying, "Why are you all looking down? I'm up here." And then I kept on going. So I actually left my body, and it was the experience I had now that made me realize that that felt like a near death experience, because I was heading not back there. I wasn't stuck back there. I was heading to a completely different place. I was on a path. I knew I couldn't see the path, but I knew I was on the right path. I was watching the like fog become sparkles, like little glitter all over the place. And in this glitter, there was these darker areas. And this was before mobile phones or anything else. I can explain to them now, look, they look like mobile phones. Okay, they're like little tiny screens that I could see all over the place. And these little tiny screens, when I looked close at them, had my memories in them. The music was there, the music that was, just so soft and so calming. You felt I had emotions. I felt so good. It felt absolutely beautiful, stunning. The colors, everything was just out of this world. And that's why it felt so different. It felt so different. I was in a whole new universe, whole new place. I didn't know where I was, didn't care. It was good. I'm staying there. So I'm walking along and I'm looking at these little memories as I go along, and it was really nice. Obviously, I was on a mission. I was walking, didn't know where I was going because I couldn't see anything, but I was on a mission. Then the shadows came up, and it was like a wall in front of me, like a long way in front of me, and there was an opening in there. Not the pearly gates or anything else. It was just an opening for me, and I'm heading towards that opening. As I'm getting closer, I could see figures behind the wall, whatever that was. There was little shadows, little figures sticking their heads out, watching and saying, "You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here." So I was just so excited to be there. There was no way known. I'm not turning around. I'm heading. I'm going there. These little beings and everything else, they were home. That was where I was going to. And this is when I did hear the booming voice. Now, the booming voice you don't hear. This is going to be, if you can imagine you're at a rock concert and everyone takes the sound away, but you can hear the vibration still, you can feel the beat. That is what I found. That's what I heard or felt as the booming voice. So it wasn't the sound of it, it was that vibration, like that beat of it. And that was like, oh, you're not supposed to be here. It was like, you've got to go back. Like the whole thing was like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. I've got to go back. And that's when I came to back at work in the bank. And then I realized I was laying on this thing. But apparently the doctor had come around and given me an adrenaline shot to bring me back. So again, I'm not aware of any of that. I wasn't there for that in that context. And I just came to, and I'd lost my bladder, and it was really embarrassing and so horrible. So I just sort of went, I want to go home. And they let me drive home without, after all this experience. But for them, it was just, I just passed out. They didn't
Right.
know
I,
what I
I
went.
get it now. I understand why you differentiated, because I guess if I listen to a definition for out of body experience, out of body where you're still connected to and didn't leave the presence of that earthly body, but you are outside of it,
Yeah.
versus you are in a different realm.
Yeah, and that's why I put it that way. And maybe that was what my learning was all about, because, to experience two so quickly together. And I've heard of other people say, "Oh, I had a near-death experience. I got hit by a car, and but nothing happened." I'm thinking, hang on, no, that was if you left your body, that was an out-of-body experience. And I've heard other people call near-death experiences where, oh, the car just missed them. I think that's not what I call a near death experience. That's a near car accident experience, or near that. But it wasn't. I see near death experiences when you completely go. You're out of here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you almost were on, I'm going to call it the cusp of a life review. So you
Mm.
saw the sparkles, and then when you looked at them more closely, they were like little screens. So can you elaborate as much as you can remember and as much as you can use the human language to kind of describe what these were in this realm that you were seeing?
Again, I go back to, they were like little mobile phone screens. Now, in those days, like we're talking like years and years and years ago, 100 years ago. I was only 18 at the time, and 19 by then. These were like little tiny television screens, and you would look at them, and not all of them. Like there was, if you can imagine, there was lots of Oh, I guess when you think about it, I saw them as sparkles. But if they were positive memories, these little screens became those other, and not necessarily bad memories, but they were other memories that needed to be shown. So they were scattered through. So it's not like you were going through and assessing your whole life. You were looking at just little memories of it. And I can't tell you now whether they were positive or negative. I don't remember. I just remember looking at them and going, oh, they're my memories.
So
And that
did you
was,
relive any of them?
no, I didn't. But I wasn't supposed to be there, remember?
Right. Well, obviously, everybody who tells these stories isn't supposed to be there because they came back, but
Came back, yeah. That's true. It's really, when you see the colors and stuff like that and the music, like it's really hard to put it into words because the colors are like, one of the colors I saw was closest to green that I could say, but it's not green in the dense of green. It's green in a light, as in a a light green. You know how you've got your lights, your LED lights, sometimes they're a bit blue and then other times you can make your lights yellow.
yeah,
It
that's
was like,
The Kelvin scale. Sure. Yeah.
yeah, well, this was like a green, and it was a green, like a green light.
Oh,
um
interesting. I love, okay, that might be one of the best descriptions of how I can understand it. So Kelvin scales run warm to cool. So
oh,
in the warmer, you would have what they would call like a warm white, which would be like a 2700 Kelvin or a 3000 Kelvin. Then when you get to a 5000 Kelvin, you're starting to get to more of a daylight, a brighter light, and then you start to get to more of a blue when you hit a 7000 Kelvin. So you're talking about almost like the Kelvin scale, but as a green hue instead of
yes,
like an amber hue or a blue hue, which I
yeah,
love. I can totally understand what you're talking about now.
because I didn't. But now you've explained it. Yes, that's exactly what it's like. So it's going past what we know, and it's expanding on that.
Because it changes everything. Like if you're in a room and you light it with a 2700 Kelvin, which is an amber color, it puts almost like a romantic hue. It's like we're going to relax here. Where if you had something that was like a 5000 Kelvin, you're like, whoa, bright light. And the paint would even look different in that hue than it would at any of the other hues. It
Yeah.
just changes the whole ambiance, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go then into the mauves or the purples and into the green. And it was the green that really captured me for some reason. And every time I have spoken about it, it was like a green, because that was the closest one I could pick to green that around here, green that we know on this earth. The rest of the colors were just, you had all the colors, but they were just so very, very different. And the music, the closest we get to is like the flute in that sort of context, but the music itself was even different.
Was it singing? Was it instrumental? Was it like a vibrational, like a humming? What was it?
It I actually hadn't thought of it like this. I don't feel it was singing. In the terminology that we know singing, I don't feel it was singing. It could be more vibrational, that energy vibration, similar to, when you do the singing bowls,
Mm-hmm.
it could be more of that vibrational energy. I can't say it was instrumental, but it had an instrumental aspect to it. Oh, that doesn't make sense,
That's
but
okay. No, that's okay. I know. I'm so sorry. I hate sometimes always asking these questions because I know the words are going to fail to
yes.
really explain what you would like to use your words to explain. We just don't have the right vocabulary.
Yeah.
So what about
That's
those?
why that booming voice, because when you say booming voice, it is like that because of the energy of it, but there's no sound.
Because it was all telepathic.
It must have been, yeah. Yeah, because I knew. And it's really funny because, like, if you're getting told off for something, you imagine what sort of a voice it would be. It would be like something like your mother's voice or a masculine voice. You know, if you're being told off for something, you'll have a type of voice that you would associate that with. My mum didn't tell me off that way. My mum, if I remember my mum, it's more of that soft, nurturing voice. So it was very masculine in the terminology, but the voice that I got in that it makes sense. So that booming, that vibration was very, very masculine for me, and it was like, you're not supposed to be here, get back, you know, that sort of thing. And I kept the words. It was the feeling. The words didn't come out as, oh, you're not supposed to be here. It was the feeling that, oh, whoops, I'm not supposed to be here, I better go. And the
Okay.
little figures behind the wall were laughing. They thought it was funny.
Interesting. So I haven't heard of anybody talk about figures this way. Were they tiny? Were they
They were small.
human-like?
They were human-like and they were small. So it gave me the feeling, and maybe this was the impression again, because you're not seeing your feeling. It felt childlike. And that's why when I picture it in my head, I picture them as childlike. So children.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Anything else that stands out that you want to share about that?
Um No, I don't think so. It just happened. It happened so quick, but it felt so long. You know, like it felt so natural. So it wasn't scary at all. It just felt like, you know, people talk about death and, oh, they're frightened of death. It's not scary at all. It's harder for the people that you live, that are alive still, than it is for the person crossing over.
Oh, for sure, because we're the
Yeah,
ones left behind.
yeah.
So for you, you were 19. Do you have the memories that you're able to revisit, and are they as vivid now as they were when they
Yeah.
happened, or have they faded a little bit?
No, 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 still, I can't remember the memories, but I didn't look at them very long. But the whole process, not faded at all. It's very, very clear. And it's very calming. Like if I do start to get a little bit worked up and life starts to get a little bit crazy, I can remember those, and I remember that feeling. And again, that's the other aspect, Laurie. When I was doing the outer body experience, there was no emotional attachment. None at all. I didn't feel emotional at all. Yet when I had the near death experience, I felt emotions, or I felt the feelings when I was there. You felt them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So after this, you're 19, you've had this profound out of body, and you didn't have the religious background. So, what kind of a conclusion do you come to about what we are after having these experiences?
The conclusion I came to after those two experiences will not tell anybody and hide it.
Interesting. Well, is that just because it wasn't in the vernacular back then?
Yeah, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what I was experiencing. I thought I was going a little bit crazy. There was no way known I'm sharing that sort of stuff. Weird. You're a weirdo was probably where I was going to. So I actually kept all of that to myself. As far as anyone's concerned, I passed out at work. That was it. That was all there was to it. I never spoke about it because I didn't understand it to start with. And it wasn't until about 10 years, 15 years later that I started to do a lot of self-development. I was going through a pretty tough marriage situation. So I started to do a lot of work on myself. I would go to the library, get lots of books because I couldn't afford them. So I'd get lots of books, take them home, read them, get what I needed out of them. If it resonated with me, I'd take it on board. If it didn't, I'd put it aside. I was also a theory tester, so I would test the theories. I didn't just take on board what other people believed. I would test the theories. And I remember reading a book about near-death experiences, and it had about 6 examples in it. And I remember reading them and thinking, well, that didn't happen to me, but that little bit did. And then that didn't happen to me, but that little bit did. And it started to put them together. And then I realized with the near death experience, that's what I'd had. I'd had a near-death experience because these other aspects of it, they talked about tunnels. I didn't go into a tunnel, but it felt almost tunnel-like because I knew where I was going, and there was no way you'd go anywhere else. You would just, so it was almost like tunnel vision rather than an actual tunnel. So there was lots of these little things that happening, and like I said, the little videos that I saw, these little TV screens, and because I remember saying they're my memories. And it wasn't until I read about that they talked about their memories. And it was like, oh, well, that happened. Not the same way, but that happened. That's when I realized exactly what had happened to me. And I got the understanding of the outer body experience as well. Again, didn't want to talk about it. Like that was my stuff. I had to sort of understand it and absorb it first before I could actually speak about it. And it wasn't until a podcast came out that I actually started to talk about what had happened.
And I
Um,
think that's super common for people who have, I think it's, there's some statistic in the studies that most people wait on average 15 to 20 years before they ever begin really speaking about it. And it's so much easier now. It's such a different culture, and there's so much more information and more people sharing that it is definitely a lot more mainstream, and it doesn't seem weird even anymore. I think most people, if you said, "Oh, I know somebody who had a near death experience," they wouldn't recoil. They'd be like, "Oh, really? What was it?" Right?
yeah, be more interested rather than sort of going, oh, you're strange, go away.
Yeah. So for you, you already shared the story of when you were young and you felt your mother's emotions,
Yeah.
and now you've had this experience. And from what I understand, a lot of people who have an exposure on the other side, they also then gain new abilities that they didn't necessarily have before, or strengthen ones that they did. So what happened for you?
The strength in the ones that I did have, that actually happened. And it's quite challenging when you're feeling other people's emotions and you aren't aware that you're feeling other people's emotions. Because I would go into the room and I could say, that person's this way, that person's that way, and you sort of, I knew exactly what was going on.
Almost kind of like they're wearing a red shirt and they're wearing blue jeans, right?
Yeah, they're having a bad moment. They're feeling really happy. That's this way. So I could feel these emotions, but what I was doing, what I was actually doing was being aware of their emotions. I would then change myself to match their emotions. That's where I was going wrong. So I had to be able to I had to learn how to do the protection, how to get an understanding of it, how to know what's mine and what isn't mine, and that's where this intuitive mediumship sort of all came about in that context. But as I'll just regress a little bit there, as I was reading all those books and getting the understanding, that's when I read about astral traveling and how you can do astral traveling. That's that's a whole new story. I'm a theory tester. I had to test that theory. So for about 6 months, I think it was, every night I'd go to bed and, okay, I'm going to travel. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And one night, I went to bed and all of a sudden I am flying out our driveway. And I got so excited and straight back into the bed. So I didn't astral travel for long. I did practice it and practice it until I could do it. I did do it. And as soon as I had done it, it was like, okay, now you know the difference between that. So I haven't done it since then. I don't feel I need to do that since then. My daughter does a lot of it. She hates it. Whereas I found it quite exciting. And
What
I
did
do
she dislike about it? I'm curious.
usually when it happens to her, what happens is she'll have a bad night and then she gets like overtired. And the next night, because she's overtired, she astral travels. And she hates it. She doesn't feel like she's in control.
So
And
it's
yet
the
you are.
out of control part that she doesn't enjoy.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Because if you imagine, I practice and practice it, I wanted to do it. She is doing it without wanting to do it. So it's not in her vocabulary. It's not where she wants to be. She is very, very spiritual. Both my daughters are very spiritual. She's Pisces. So they have the ability to do that. But that's all her learning and her training. So when she was younger, I had to help them through that. So it was like, okay, if you don't want to do that, you've just got to let them know, rah, 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 do this, do this, do this, protect yourself, and it won't happen. So usually we lose a lot of our, not lose it, we hide a lot of our powers or our understandings once we get into school, and especially high school, because you want to, conform with what everyone's doing. Nowadays, it's not so much. Nowadays, it's a lot more open. It's really, really lovely. But yeah, she didn't like the astral traveling at all. But she also saw a lot of spirits, and um, she saw a lot of dead people, a lot of dead children.
Well, will you share one of your most, I don't know, interesting astral travels that you experienced?
I've only done it once. I've
Oh.
only done astral travel once. I'm not interested in doing it.
Oh,
I
I
know,
thought you said that you were completely interested in it and that's what you'd wanted to do it.
yes, I did. But once I had done it, it's like, okay,
Okay.
I've done it. I needed to get an understanding of the different feelings. So if you can imagine, I've had an outer body experience where I didn't move and I watched what was happening, had the near death experience, which I completely left my body. And then I've had the astral travel experience, which was very, very short and very, very brief. But I realized we actually have control over our spirit and where we want to go and what we want to do.
Which is really empowering, I would say.
Yeah, I
So
really
now, since you've had this near-death experience, you have gotten into all kinds of different things. You mentioned your mediumship, and I know you also mentioned your podcast, and we had a brief conversation about the work that goes in. I don't think most people don't really understand how much effort goes into creating content, videos, recording them, editing them, posting them, and it is a labor of love. The people who really do this, you have to really, really love what you're doing because it is a job otherwise. So tell us a little bit about what you've done in the world and how this near death out of body experience and astral travel has influenced what you do now.
well, I guess my biggest learning out of it, and I now have a learning. It's taken a long time. My biggest learning was, and I teach about intuition, how we can, learn to trust ourselves and trust our messages that we get through. And that was my biggest understanding. But I remember thinking, well, what is intuition? Where's that coming from? Is it just here now? Is it from other spirit? Now I'm going, no, well, psychic and clairvoyant, you're bringing in information from other spirits and all the rest. Intuition was a little bit different. It was a little bit more personal. And I would toss this idea around and everything else. But eventually, after doing the astral traveling too, for me, intuition is the communication between our physical body and our spiritual body. And we
Mm.
communicate through our chakras.
Oh, yes.
And the chakras run both ways.
Well, so not everybody listening, watching will understand the chakras. So will you explain what they work and how you understand them?
Well, there's lots of chakra centers, but we have seven main ones going up and down the spine. Basically, we have the seven main chakras. You can Google it. There's plenty of information about it, so you'll get lots of stuff. But what it is, it's they're energy centers, and they're cycles. They're energy centers that spin, for want of another word, a Sanskrit word for spinning, and energy can go out and energy can come in. So you can receive energy and you can give energy that way. And when you're receiving it, it's to me, it's like that information, the energy information that's coming from our external circumstances to our internal ones, to our spirit. For an example, if you were walking down the street, now you were talking about this before when you're talking about people in Australia and you went, oh, and there's some really hotties in Australia. People
There
are
are. When I visited there's some very good-looking Australian people. It's a very
so
attractive country.
yeah, so when you're going through that and you sort of go, well, that person's a bit all right. Where do you feel that person's a bit all right? Because if you're feeling in your base chakra, which is right down the very bottom, it's a very sexual attraction. If you're feeling it higher up, it's more about a mutual attraction if in your sacral area. And it could be all about oh, I want to have a baby with that person, or something to that effect. When we're feeling a little bit higher up, we go into the solar plexus. We're feeling that because they make us feel good. So the solar plexus is all about us and how we respond. And then, of course, then you go into the heart chakra, and the heart chakra is more to do with the love. So normally, when you first see somebody, you're not feeling it from the heart chakra. You could be feeling it from the base because they look pretty hot.
I love that explanation. That's super
Yeah.
helpful.
And so as you're going along, so the bottom chakras are more of the physical side of life. And then as we get further up, we go into the spiritual side. So the throat chakra is about communication, the third eye is about what we're seeing, and of course the crown chakra is about the information that we get downloaded to us. So again, they've got to go backwards and forwards too. So we're receiving information and we're giving information. As we're receiving that, it's going into our spirit. It's going into that. You've got to remember, spirit doesn't have the five senses. That's why you don't see or hear when you leave your body. It's the energy that you're getting, because the spirit has to come into the physical body to be able to experience touch and taste and sight, sound.
Right,
So
which is why we come here.
exactly, that's why we come here, to get those learnings. But how does the spirit get that learning? And it's that energy going through our chakras.
That makes sense. So
Mm.
you have this YouTube channel also. Tell us a little bit about what you do there and what kind of content you produce.
I run sort of two. So I've got the Voice of Intuition, which is the podcast. I tend to put that one on that side of it, and then the other one is I've done a lot of flower reading. So I've got a book called Intuitive Flowers, and reading flowers. It's reading flower images now. We've brought it up to the 21st century, so we can read flower images. In doing that, what it's doing, it's giving you a logical way of following an image or following something, and then it's allowing your intuition to tap into that logic, if that makes sense. So when we're looking at flower readings, we look at, say, the stem of the flower. Now, the stem is your path or journey to achieve your goal. The flower is the goal. The stem is the path or journey to achieve that goal. So we start looking at that path or journey, and you say, well, is it strong enough? What color is it? Is it branching? Do we have to make decisions? Is there multiple stems? Is there a single stem? And you start to use that analytical side. And as you're using your analytical side, your intuition will start to kick in, and you'll go, well, actually, it's a hibiscus, and the hibiscus comes from a bush, which means it's coming from the family. It's all about the family. That's the base of it. Whereas if we look at a field of flowers, like, say, tulips, the field of flowers means that the base of it's coming from like-minded people. You're looking at like-minded people in that aspect. That's what's going to support you. That's what's going to help you there. Or if you look at a climbing flower, like a jasmine, your stem, your journey, your path needs really strong support. It needs something to grow on. You can't just do this on your own. Or a water lily, you have to have that emotion around you to hold you up.
Love it. That's really interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about anything like that. So people that are watching, if they want to connect with you, how do they do that?
I've got my website. It's intuitivenature.com.au. So it's an Australian website. And on there too, I've got this little free quiz to work out how you receive your intuitive messages. So whether you receive them physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And that gives you an understanding. It's a bit like how we learn, but we receive those messages in different ways. So what is your strongest one, and how can you hone in on that one and get an understanding of it? But what I find one of the hardest one is mental intuition, because it's thoughts coming to you and you sort of sit there and go, was that me, or was that something else? So sometimes it's hard to distinguish what's going on. In physical, when things are happening to your body, you sort of think, oh no, there's something wrong with me. Well, actually, no, that's just signs that are coming through saying, have a look at that.
So I'm going to ask you one last question that just I'm super curious about, because your experience is very different than a lot of people that I talk to, because it was very traumatic. So in hindsight now, you had that out of body experience and the near death experience. How would you say that those experiences have actually enhanced the life that you have right now?
It's allowed me to look at it very differently. I was really again, I'm quite analytical, so things have to make sense for me. And when I look at the outer body experience, it wasn't the attack or anything else. I mean, I talk about it, but it does. I don't have that feeling, that connection, and I feel it's because I got the answer that I needed, and I instigated it. I put it into action. One of the things I teach with the intuition is the first thing to do is ask, and that's what I did during the attack without realizing. I asked for help. The second part is that when you ask, you are open to receiving, and you can receive that information, and that's what I did. The last part is actioning, and thank goodness I actioned it, because I feel that's what's helped me get through it. I have had times when I've asked, I have got the answer that I wanted, and I've not actioned it, and have, yeah, realized, like, oh damn, I should have done that. But that was sort of my biggest understanding in it, that these lessons, these things come to us if we can find a silver lining for them, if we can find something positive. And as I said, I never ever talked about this because I had to find that silver lining before I could talk about it. I can talk about it now because I know that there's people out there that may have experienced something like that. Find the silver lining, find the learning from it, and that's what's going to help you grow, develop, and become who you need to be.
Oh, I absolutely love that. It's one of the reasons I do this and have these interviews and have these discussions, because you've just given everybody hope, because you're relatable to a
Mm,
traumatic experience, that if they've experienced something like that, that it's still in the best interest to find the silver lining and
yes.
take whatever you lessons from that. And I think that that's a massive empowerment, as opposed to becoming the victim and curling up into a ball and taking that in and making your life about that, instead of learning from it and then living your life in a different way. So I am so grateful to have a conversation, and I'm really grateful for your vulnerability, because it must be difficult to take something like what happened to you and share it with the world and talk about it and almost have to relive it again and again. So I want to thank you so much for sharing and for what you are doing to help wake up the collective consciousness, because it is so needed right now.
It is, it is. And thank you for having me on. It's been wonderful.
It has been wonderful. I really love this. This is definitely the best part of my day. And thank you to everybody for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.